Hello, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And I don't know if I've actually mentioned some of these. I most probably have, especially in the past, knowing myself. But let's do a sort of a dedicated episode on this. Have you noticed how people sometimes deliberately act crude? Or maybe it's just that not even deliberately. Yeah, some of them they do it deliberately, but they think that they are embarrassing you or pointing you out or making you stand out, but they're actually being very, very crude. And have you noticed how people who always want to make comments on other people and they, kind of do it in a loud voice for others to hear? Have you noticed that these are the people who it seems are probably bringing out their own inferiority complex? For example, have you ever noticed how people who make the most comments on other people's fashion sense are the ones who have the worst fashion sense themselves? Like those people who wear very, very, very bold makeup, very noticeable makeup, and they they wear loud colors, loud makeup, loud clothes, the kind of things that actually do not come under the, streamline of elegant fashion, you can say. They actually have this thing where they always have to comment on other people's fashion sense, especially those who go for a more sophisticated look or who do makeup the way actually makeup was originally supposed to be done. I mean, how many of you know that the original purpose of makeup was to enhance your own natural features in such a way that it looks as if you're naturally beautiful? That is the whole point of makeup, of contouring, of things like that. But then people went on to do noticeable, bold makeup. So they forgot that the whole idea behind makeup is that it has to be as if you're not wearing any makeup. So those people actually have no sense of that. And when they see people with that natural sort of sophisticated makeup, they go ahead and make comments that, oh, they don't even know how to do makeup, they have no fashion sense, they have no this, they have no that. Similarly, have you noticed how there are people who will make it a point to point out if you, for example, do one day wear a lipstick or a lip liner or an eyeliner, and they have to point it out in front of everybody. Oh, you're wearing lipstick today. Oh, you're wearing a lip liner today. Oh, let me see, let me see. And they think that, I don't know what they think they're actually doing, but they actually are being very crude because they are forcing other people to notice somebody who probably doesn't even want to be noticed. So then that begs the question, are they deliberately doing it to make that person feel embarrassed? Or, but at the end of the day, they are the ones who are being embarrassing themselves. While we're on the topic of weird ass stuff, can somebody explain to me why is it that sanitary napkins are never kept at a minimal affordable price? Like, you do realize that these are not luxurious items. These are not in the wants list. These are in the needs to survive list. You know. So when, I mean, you're literally cashing off of somebody's permanent lifetime condition. You're cashing on a woman's health and safety. You're cashing on the woman's survival. Explain to me why this is not on the list of subsidized items, for example, in any part of the world, and why it is not on the list of something that must be available at all costs, at the minimal price possible. You see developed countries, even like Japan, struggling with high cost. And there is actually a word in developed countries which you would never hear in our countries, which are allegedly third world, and that is period poverty. Yeah, let that sink in. I don't know when exactly this podcast is going to be completed and it will be uploaded because I'm actually doing it in snippets. So it means that I actually recorded part 2 and part 3 today after probably a week of putting part of recording a few minutes, which is part 1. And obviously when I upload the whole thing, it will be uploaded as one seamless whole complete episode. But as I speak, to me it's part 1, part 2, part 3. And amongst all the weird ass stuff that people seem to do, have you also noticed how people seem to always worship the corrupt? They worship those who they know have crossed all lines and boundaries and limits and rules and principles to become powerful and wealthy. Also, people will always worship the dead. When they're alive, you don't give a frack about them. They can rot in jail for all you care. You'll still sit and look and watch the spectacle, watch the drama go on as spectators. And then when they die, hey presto, they become martyrs. They become martyrs, and then you will cash in on their death for as long as you live. Also, remember my take on so called developed countries as opposed to so called third world countries, and what my opinion is with regards to GDP as opposed to the actual economic status of that country. Now, for example, you have the G7. And now, it's very, very strange what I'm going to say. It's almost an oxymoron. But take Japan, for example. If anything, Japan is supposed to be the most innovative, the most futuristic, the most attention to detail paying kind of a government that they have. And yet, even their own people are beginning to have issues with government corruption, with relative poverty. Well, I mean, not begun to have issues with relative poverty per se, because relative poverty exists. And although they claim that Japan is the seventh, as in the lowest, as in the last of the G7, which means it has the highest, maybe relative poverty, you could say. But I would say, what about America? I mean, not even, we're not talking about G7 here. I'm talking about poverty, relative poverty. What about Britain? What about Canada and its lack of infrastructure, despite the fact that Canada has healthcare, but the healthcare even has collapsed due to the influx of, a surplus population that they were unprepared for. Look at how developed countries are measured as developed countries based on their GDP, but the actual people are poor. Below even, they're slipping below poverty line. Now, Japan, that refers itself to as a middle class society for the longest time. Never even realized that they had been slowly slipping below even middle class into poverty, and now probably even past poverty line. Does that sound familiar? It sounds familiar, isn't it? We, Pakistan, allegedly a third world country, or even India. I would never refer to India as a developed country, and anybody who refers to India as a developed country, GDP or not, is not in their senses, because in my opinion, considering the population of that country, it is nowhere near that. But anyway, let's just talk about Pakistan. Considering our population, considering our economic status, considering our everything, we are at the exact same position as the G7 countries, as the developed countries. Isn't that funny? We too were a predominantly middle class society. And remember, the middle class of any society is the backbone of that society. Once your middle class begins to slip through into lower middle class, that means they're slipping into poverty line. And once they cross that, they're going below poverty line. Has Pakistan ever seen this before? No. But Pakistan has been gradually slipping through in the past 2 decades. Sounds familiar? Yeah. So I find that really weird when economists talk about economy and GDP and all. When this is all just superficial, it's all on paper, is what I'm saying. Because every country is made up of people. It's not made up of what the government itself has in its treasury, but it's made up of the people. And if the people are not able to sustain a good quality lifestyle, at least with the minimum basic standards to be met. And yet, to us, the Japanese are actually above that, when if you compare it to America, to Europe, to any other country in the world. God knows, even if you look at their bathrooms, they're futuristic, and that is their minimum requirement and their basic standard. And to them, if they're to them, if they are going below poverty line. Imagine, imagine how high their standards are compared to the rest of the world, and yet even they are now slipping through. Just compare Japan with America and Europe, which are literally villages compared to Japan, and yet look at what is going on. So it's weird, isn't it? It's so weird how economy comes and places these superficial facts and figures that actually are not facts and figures, because as I said, every nation is made up of its population, not of the handful of people that are sitting above representing that population. Also, while we're at it, have you noticed how people are so weird assed and hypocritical and how squeamish they get? Especially men, when you're talking about your period, when you're talking about PMS, when you're talking about the whole cycle. Well, I mean, you would understand men to be squeamish because they're idiots, but when women also act as if this is, something so taboo, you do realize that in our religion, the Prophet, peace be upon him himself, and Hazrat Aisha, they talked very openly about these things. Because if you do not talk about them, how would you know what to do, what not to do? How would you know? If it was something that was taboo, how would the Prophet talk about every detail of what kind of sex, for example, is allowed and what isn't, what is safe, what isn't? How could he give you a sex education? How would you know what is allowed and what's not allowed? How would you know that? You know, again, if it was taboo, how would you know about what you do before or after you've had your period? What do you do during your period? Again, if there is nobody to tell you what to do, because again, this is part of your daily life. And if anything, you might as well just think about being pregnant as a taboo then. Oh, then why are you constantly pushing people to have kids? Why? Why are you constantly hounding? That time you are so shameless. That time you don't realize how shameless you sound when you literally hound your kids who have just gotten married, that they now have to have kids. You do realize what you're implying by that. You're implying that they need to get more sexually active. They need to have sex almost every day. That's literally what you're saying to them when you're constantly pushing them hard to have kids. I find that so controversial, so hypocritical, so weird assed, you know, that you find it so squeamish to even talk about period or mention period. And you also act as if, oh, a woman who's pregnant, uh, you know, eh, and yet that is exactly what you as a society are pushing everybody for. And you do realize that your period is a trial run. It's literally a trial run. It's like your body preparing itself for pregnancy every 22 days. It's called ovulation for a reason. When you ovulate, your body completely builds up these walls. Literally, it's literally your body going into a sort of a pre labor stance. It is actually doing constructive labor job inside. It's building walls for a potential baby to protect that baby. And obviously, when your body sees it, okay, so here's another egg that didn't get fertilized. The egg passes through, obviously. And then what are you left with now? Walls that you don't need. So now your body has to break down those walls. And that's why you're hemorrhaging. That's why you're bleeding. All those walls that your body built within the womb, they're not breaking down and they have to come out. They're breaking down and you're bleeding out. Tell me, what about it sounds taboo to anybody? What? What about having a period makes a man so squeamish? That is so weird assed. That is so weird assed. I don't get it. you know. And the fact that, again, because as I said, this is not even taboo in Islamic culture. This is taboo in pagan culture, again, where we have restricted women to being other beings. They're not human beings, they're not equals, you know. You're again putting them into that. In Islam, you're not filthy when you're hemorrhaging. In Islam, there is no concept that you are, you know, not pure because you're hemorrhaging, because you have your period. Similarly, you're not impure because you're pregnant. This is a this is your whole cycle that you have to go through because your body is constantly in the mode of preparing itself for you to get for you to be prepared to be a potential mother. So that is your body in motion. It is natural and it is normal. And I do not understand the hypocritical stance here. It makes me think that people really need to get evolved, their minds, you know. No wonder in Islam, education is an obligation. This is the sign of uneducated, stupid ass, moronic brains. When you cannot scientifically understand something that is part of your whole survival, it's literally a part of your survival. What is taboo about understanding something that is part of life? It's not, you're not talking about somebody doing makeup. You're not talking about somebody plucking their eyebrows. You're not talking about somebody doing something voluntary. This is something that is designed by God. You know, it's weird. I just find it weird. As a person who has studied science myself, as a person who understands things the way they're supposed to be understood, I find it so weird how people cannot understand things the way they should be understood. That's all. By the way, with regards to period poverty, I did not mean it doesn't exist in our country. It obviously exists in every country. I was specifically mentioning the fact of how it is a thing in allegedly developed countries. And also in countries like ours, actually, because most of the women already have native, more organic ways of taking care of the whole thing. That is why one could argue that they may not have such a huge issue, but at the same time, that is also why they do have a huge issue. And this again brings me back to my point. Why is it that something that is actually a matter of health and safety and survival, why is such a thing put in the market as a form of luxury and not as something that is amongst your basic needs? I really want to know that. Well, it seems I have put together quite a few points, really, but I think minute wise it has become sufficient enough for me to upload this. If I find some more weird ass things that I feel that I would like you also to share with me to see, have you ever noticed people doing such weird ass stuff? Then I'll probably upload a part two. So this will be uploaded inshallah today, and this is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.